There's one really great example that's popping up in the news, and it's this Dylan Mulvaney, I think the individual's name is.
Dylan Mulvaney.
It's some of the funniest content. I mean, Dylan says that they're a performer putting on a performance, and I respect that and think the performance is very, very funny. The only thing is, it's at the expense of women, right? Dylan Mulvaney, for those not familiar, posted his video, got invited to the White House and got a cookie, and the whole performance. And again, I'll stress this. Mulvaney says outright that this is a performance. I bring that up and people are like, no, it's serious. No, it's serious. And I'm like, I mean, maybe Dylan's literally trans, but the character they're playing is exaggerated, over the top performance. And it's, when they say woman face, I'm like, no, that's literally what this is, right? The point I'm trying to make is, you mentioned that even trans people are getting concerned about what's going on, Blair White being a good example, because Dylan Mulvaney's character is a caricature of women and trans people, not indicative of who trans people really are. So you have this person who's wearing high heels while going hiking, and just this very cartoonish character, and it's got a lot of trans people and women angry that they're being mocked by this performance.
Well, conservatism is not confined to one ideology, right? There are conservative Democrats, right? There are conservative gay people, right? So, conservatism can encompass a wider branch of philosophies than most people might think. It's not confined to republicanism.
But hey, Biden really likes Dylan Mulvaney. And according to Dylan, who came out today, he says that Biden said that he watches his TikTok channel and that they're going to come out with an official conversation and interview this coming Sunday. Wow. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. But to the point that you guys are making here, I think it's important to note here that, a lot of the times when people are a part of different communities, especially in the conservative kind of wing, they usually don't make it their personality. Sometimes they do, and it's a little bit annoying. But when you just come to the table and say, hey, my sex, my gender, my choice of how I decide to procreate is everything all about me, it's kind of annoying, and it kind of takes away from the human being. And that's what you see from a lot when it comes to a lot of these social media personalities that just use it as a way to have a fake personality.
I think it's possible we get to the point, I see one of two futures. One where offensive comedy comes back with a vengeance.
Hope so.
And you start seeing, like, remember when Sarah
Richard Pryor's and stuff,
Yeah, I mean, when George Carlin called Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy the N-word on stage to thunderous applause. Like, I mean, it's shocking.
It's true, but it's true.
Yeah, he did outright. And the point he was making is that it was a joke because they're not. Like, it was meant to be absurd. That George Carlin is a hippie who doesn't really believe in this stuff, and it was meant to be shocking and offensive. But you can't do that kind of stuff these days.
No way.
Maybe it'll go swing in the complete other direction, or maybe it will come to the point where woman face becomes extremely offensive, and people like Dylan Mulvaney get banned for misogyny.
But how do you do that? I mean, like, how do you rally women around that to reclaim womanhood that it isn't some entirely conservative female movement? I mean, are liberal females really going to get on board with a reclaiming, woman face? Like, so I mean, you've got to.
Well, my point is maybe. I'm not saying right now. I mean, I don't know where we're at.
I wonder what the psychology is. There have to be some kind of polarizing event.
What I see is either the woman face phenomenon results in people saying mockery of any identity is fair play, or it turns into, we've realized for some time that's probably not okay to mock women in this way.
But shouldn't it be okay though? Shouldn't everybody be up for grabs? I mean, like, when you were kids, there was always that one serious kid who told the teacher every time somebody said something mean about him, and then the rest of us were all having a laugh or having a joke, right?
I mean, I don't think it should be illegal or banned or anything like that, but people are allowed to have tastes. You know what I mean? Like Sarah Silverman did blackface. Personally, I'm not a fan of it. George Carlin, I'm a huge fan of, but his joke where he calls Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor the N-word, I'm not all about that. I understand his point about being offensive. I think he should be allowed to do it. I think he can make his joke, and turns out tons of people really loved what he said. Good for him. That's not my thing.
Is there a time and place for blackface? Yeah. You know what I mean? Is there, let's say you were doing a documentary or a film about Al Jolson, right? So, I mean, like, there is a time and place to do blackface, right? So, I mean, the only thing that we're calling out Sarah Silverman for is the hypocrisy of the left, right? Not because she did blackface.
But you mean doing blackface insofar as you're mocking what it represented?
Yes.
Like the joke of modern blackface with someone like Sarah Silverman was that you're sort of making fun of the old ways when these people were racist and it was wrong, and you're supposed to be shocked by it and it's funny because it's deeply offensive. You know what I mean? Like,
wasn't that what Al Jolson was doing though? With it originally, like he was doing a parody of the blackface at the time.
Not only that, but like RDJ, like Robert Downey Jr. in that movie Tropic Thunder.
Oh,
years
right,
ago.
right,
It was
right.
a joke.
Right.
It was specifically this. It's exactly what we're talking about
To poke fun at the people who do it.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
I think the Tropic Thunder is hilarious.
It is
and
so
the gag
funny.
was actors who go too far into method acting, and he went so far he actually
Did blackface.
Well, it's more than that. Like his character got like skin pigmentation. Like
It's a wild.
I just say personally myself, let people say and do and express themselves as they want, as long as they don't physically hurt other people. People should be able to control their own emotions. We shouldn't be policing conversation, speech, and art. Let it express itself. And if someone wants to be distasteful, that is their perspective and opinion, but it's also your opinion to get triggered and angry and emotional about it. So at the end of the day, people's words and actions only have power if you give them that power. And I think if a lot of more of us were more mature about this, we could have a situation where we didn't have censorship. We didn't have, of course, the destruction of free speech and the progression of society. But sadly, we do, because people saying, I don't like this. This is offending me. Stop him right now.
Sure.
And I think that's just weak. And I think that's
Well, as with-
a low vibrational energy, that's not good for human consciousness.
Well, as with a lot of things, right? Like the woke people will take like a grain of truth and then spin it around it a yarn of lies. So emotional abuse is a real thing, right? A use of institutional power to emotionally abuse an affected group, that's a real thing. The problem is that when you take that and then you liberalize it and you expand it into an entire web, then you go too far, and then there's going to be collateral damage. So the question is, how do you define what is emotional abuse? That's the problem, right? And that's the realm of therapists to be able to answer a question like that. Maybe you guys know more than I do, but at some point, I hate bullies. Right? I can't stand bullies. And when you see somebody being bullied because of their race or their sexuality or something like that, you want to stand up against that, right? At least I do, right? That for me, I'm not a conservative. I'm a libertarian. So how do you do that, right? Without saying, oh, you're just a woke social justice warrior taking the side of the left or something like that. How do you stand up for the rights of affected minorities from actual emotional abuse without crossing over into larger effective?
I just want to say,
confront the bully directly to their face.
Right.
Dave Chappelle, I think, said it best. You don't like it? Don't watch it.
Right.
If you don't like what I say, you don't have to listen to it. You choose to watch and listen certain things. And if you don't like someone, you don't like their taste, that you got offended by them, don't watch them. It's your choice at the end of the day.
Remember that viral tweet that I think it was Tyler, the Creator? And he said, how is cyberbullying a real thing? Like, just close your eyes.
Yeah, that was
just
him.
like turn the screen off.
But here's the thing. We're guys. We're all guys. We don't have any women at this table. Those young girls bully the absolute hell out of each other.
True.
And when they're on their social media with the things that they're saying, the bullying in high school, it's not like when we were growing up, guys. It's different. They've got pictures. They've got nudes of each other.
They reach you at home.
They reach you at home. It's an insane level of harassment.
Yeah. So this is a good point, because for these kids, it used to be that if you went to school and you had problems, when you went home, you were safe from what that stressor was, but the next day you had to go face it. Today, with social media and online personas, it's infinity. It's never going anywhere. And so we're seeing suicide. We're seeing depression mostly among young girls. So yeah, I mean, I think really it's going to come down to the parents to be like, no cell phone for you.
Is the depression because of bullying, or is it because of the algorithms that perfectly highlight and curate and upvote particular content that causes drama, that causes anger, that gets people's attention, and they know if they say something negative, they'll get people responding to it. If they post something degenerate, they'll get more eyeballs, and the algorithm will reward them for this. And I think there's an argument to be made here, because I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn. There was bullying on insane levels. There was a kid who one day wasn't coming in for a few months. He was burnt all throughout his body. He lost his father in a fire. There was a bully calling him sausage face, punching him, beating him up, psychological abuse where you couldn't escape it. There was gangs, there was people bullying each other to the extent where you couldn't even go outside in many instances, because you would get kicked in, stomped on. I got stomped on a couple times. I got bullied like crazy because I didn't even speak English. So I'm saying there always was bullying.
Yes,
but who are you gonna point the finger at to?
Well, so
the algorithm or the individuals?
It's both. Yeah. But I just want to point out there's a cultural issue at play with all of this. You mentioning this kid who got burned, I got to tell you, man, where I grew up, if anybody bullied the burn kid, that bully would get stomped out in the playground. Yeah. Like, dude, everybody was kind of like, bro, you crossed a line. And that's a cultural phenomenon of kids who had some kind of moral code or just like scruples. Sounds like where you came from, it was different.
Yeah.
And no one, like, this bully knew he could do it. Nobody would stop him.
Yeah, it was it was a bigger kid who got left back a bunch of times, and everyone was afraid of him.
So
he would beat the crap out of anybody and anyone he wanted.
Yeah,
so this is kind of messed up. So when I was 14 years old, my mother passed away from cancer, and it was a traumatizing event. I watched the whole thing happen in real time in front of my face. Just horrible event. Took an entire year of suffering. And my best friend, knew that I was depressed. Like, it was about 6 months or so after she passed away. And, nothing would make me laugh. Nothing could crack. Like, I was just in a funk. And then one day we were talking about something, and he just turns to me and he goes, yeah, well, at least my mom isn't dead. And I just went, and I just started laughing so hard. And it broke me out of my funk. And I just started laughing again. I don't know what it was. But I do think, and I'm not trying to be like, soft here, but I do think we are coming at this from a very masculine worldview, because we are told to be tough, be hard, and a lot of this leftist stuff comes from feminism and feminists and women wanting to be soft and wanting to take care of people's feelings and wanting to protect people, which I totally understand, right? I understand the maternal instinct.
You want to come into the heat, get ready to get burned.
I agree, but you got to understand that a big portion of what we are opposing here in wokeism is postmodern feminism, right? And that's feelings over facts, right? So we've got to be sensitive to that in order to have a conversation with people who think that we're insensitive and that we're not thinking about that we're these hard, cold, Randian, unfeeling libertarians, right?
So what you're saying is that men are smart, logical, and tough, and women are frail, weak, and emotional.
That's what you said.
You mentioned before that using institutional power
Room full of guys
emotionally abuse someone is over the line, and I agree with you. And I think the definition of institutional power has changed since internet videos become so prominent. Now, a 13-year-old that has 700,000 followers on TikTok is the institutional power. And for a young, unfocused child to let their wildness out on another human is like heavily abusive and dangerous and can rally crowds of people to do it.
So what do you say to him? Toughen up, kid. You got 13 million followers. You're aiming it at them. You're telling them to go and harass them. Essentially, you just say, "Hey, kid, this is the world that you live in now." These aren't problems that we used to have to deal with.
They don't seem to work. You can't tell someone to stop on this. You got to ban that. Well, what they've been doing is banning them off the platform.
Right.
And that's I don't know if that's the way to go.
Yeah.
When I was at VidCon, this is maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
That's ancient.
I'm out in front of it's in Anaheim Convention Center. I'm out in front. And I think I have my skateboard. I'm skating, and I hear there's a group of little kids, like probably 12, 13, and one kid goes, "You have 85 subscribers? How?" And then he's like, "I just made videos." And the other kid was like, "I have 40." Like, these kids are talking to each other about how many followers they have. That freaked me out. I was like, that's going to warp those kids' minds. Yeah. Their whole world's going to be attached to the number of points they get, their influence number.
Yeah. Well, what I want to say about Ben Shapiro, his famous statement, facts don't care about your feelings. He's right about that, but that's from our worldview. The outside world, feelings don't care about our facts.
Well, I've long said that, and a lot of other people have said that same thing too. Yeah. And that's the more important thing to understand. Ben Shapiro is factually correct. Facts don't care about feelings, but you need to understand the political reality is that their feelings don't care about your facts.
So how do we learn this language, right? This is like learning a brand new language. We have to be able to learn this language in order to be able to counteract it, I think.
No. Look, you're correct, but we know the language. I used to do nonprofit fundraising. It's evil. I think the industry is evil. I realized that these organizations were just lying, and that what they teach people is specifically the language of feelings. They give you scripts, they break down how the scripts work, so they teach you exactly how to speak their language. And you know what? There are high functioning individuals who can build a podcast or a media platform knowing that language. That means they're probably manipulating their followers. Or you can be the quote unquote right and have real conversations, often disagree, and say, it's cool that we disagree, but not try to use emotional manipulation. Really what it comes down to is, on a show like this, if we tried to engage in hard sophistry, we'd get annihilated by the audience. They would say, you guys are liars and it's obvious. Because I think what's really starting to split the two worlds is facts versus feelings. And the people who are all about facts aren't going to be swayed by emotional manipulation. That's most of the people who are watching this show.
And the inverse.
And then it's the inverse. You watch a show like H3H3 or Hassan, and it's going to be all emotional manipulation with very little facts. Hence, the Democrats right now will say, we got to get off fossil fuels and shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Hey, Saudi Arabia, keep pumping that gas. Right. How can both of those things be true?
But do we want this balkanization, I guess is the question. I mean, if you're an anarchist, then yeah, you want to, break everybody up into separate independent republics of individuals, right? But if you want to live in the United States, like, do you want Hassan to come on this show and talk to you? Because right now we exactly.
Well, maybe
that's
not today.
Is that what we want? No. I want Hassan to come in here and engage with us. I want to talk to these people. I want to have these conversations. When I reach out to leftists and liberals to try and get them on the show, they won't do it.
Listen,
Never.
Ethan Klein got suspended on YouTube because he said that if there's another Holocaust, he hopes that Ben goes first, which is shocking and offensive. Now, my position, Ben's position, and most people in our space was basically like, he shouldn't be banned for that. He's just kind of a dick. Ethan Klein himself tweeted before that cancel culture is often a good thing. And when he's been canceled in the past, it helps him reflect and become a better person. When he got his sponsors pulled because he made gay stereotype jokes, he said, well, I guess I'm a threat to gay people, so, whatever. And he was kind of bummed about it. When he makes offensive comments about Ben Shapiro, he claimed white supremacists got him banned. I'm sorry, I got to pause there a second. You mean you made a joke about gassing Ben and you thought white supremacists were mad about it? I'm sorry, they agree with you, Ethan. But my point is, it's nonsensical. There's no logic there. There's no fact to follow. He's saying two things that contradict each other. However, in the world of emotion, that doesn't matter. So, of course, it's true. We are in this world where we look for logical consistency. And we often don't understand how they could be trapped in that world because they don't need logical consistency. They need emotional consistency. And what's that? Hating us.
Well, no, I think Ethan was joking and jibing Ben like it was an attempt to emotionally bond with Ben Shapiro.
Are you kidding, dude?
I know how people like that.
You're saying that Ethan Klein saying he hopes Ben Shapiro gets gassed was to bond with him?
Yeah, he's like, listen, fellow Jew, take responsibility for your Jewishness. Let's be together on this one, like kind of thing. It was an emotional way to say that, and it came out as a dirty joke.
Emotional in the sense that it would make the average person want to fight you, I guess.
Yeah, kind of like with a friend, and you're like, make an insulting joke to your friend, and they're like, oh yeah, and then you get like a bonding kind of thing.
No way, dude. So that is a 1 times 1. Listen, hold on. Look, when you are a personality that consistently attacks, insults, derides, and makes money off of harming, like attacking other people, and then one day you go on your show and outright say, you hope if it comes down to it, they die. I'm sorry, bro. Ian, you're wrong.
Not attacking other people. You mean insulting other people? I don't like the verb attack used in conversational terms. It's not. We're not attacking each other.
Like these are people who celebrated cancel culture, celebrated the harm to people's livelihoods, and then complain when it happens to them. They advocate for a world of pain and then demand it does not befall them. If I said this the other day, if I came out and said similar comments about AOC, ain't nobody's going to call that a joke. We're critical of AOC. We're not friends with her. Right. He is not friends with Ben Shapiro.
No,
what he said about him was not bonding. It was a direct
it was an attempt
insult.
to bond.
No, come
through
on.
Emotion.
Dude.
It was an emotional attempt to bond.
It was an attempt to deride and insult for the sake of making money.
Why would he bond with somebody that he argues with and doesn't like politically and is complete different?
It's a natural human tendency.
Can I take an informal poll amongst you guys on the subject of national divorce? Yay or nay?
Nay.
No.
Yay.
Okay, so I'm a nay as well. So we got one yay. What about you, Serge?
I think the U.S. is strong because it's many different nations. Maybe if it was a divorce where it was kind of like larger regions of the United States, maybe.
Okay.
So it's like a larger balkanization.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily know, and I wouldn't be able to say that.
So then, yay. So then that means that we've got to figure out a way to live with these people, right? Bill Maher's been talking about this on his show a couple of times. No, we don't have to figure out a way to live with these people.
No, we don't. That's why we have states, and that's why people have championed federalism.
Well,
because
even
California,
the states have Democrats in them.
That's fine.
And the internet.
What California can do, it's California's thing, so long as we outline where they're infringing upon our rights. For instance, California allowing tons of illegal immigrants to come in, then using that in the census to gain a congressional seat or an electoral vote is a violation of our rights. That needs to be adjudicated. But if California wants to have illegal immigrants that don't count towards their census, I could care less.
How can we live in a country with people who think that we are semi-fascists, right? How can we live? How can we call those people our countrymen, right?
Listen, hold on.
I'd have to side with Luke and say national divorce before we tolerate that.
There are countries in this world that want us all dead. We need to find a way to not fight with each other.
Agree.
War is bad.
Yes.
So the same goes for even within this country. Mm-hmm. I think California is a very awful place. There's poop in the streets. They ignore federal laws. The only thing I'm concerned about is there are benefits to being part of the union that make us strong and protect us from, say, Chinese communism, Chinese Communist Party. But I don't like the fact that when they become a sanctuary state and defy federal law, it gives them federal power. That should be adjudicated. I think if it came down to it, a peaceful divorce is better than a civil war. But I would prefer this country remain together. In fact, I prefer the United States actually expand. Buying Greenland, let's get it.
We need to add more states. Lucas,
I disagree. I
annex
think,
Ontario.
I think. Well, I don't want Canada.
I like Montreal.
No, Alberta. Alberta is where the oil is.
That doesn't matter.
I like Montreal.
Yeah, Montreal's not
to me, you don't have to
Let's
deal
take
with
all of Canada.
Yeah.
But listen, if you guys just listen to me and do what I want,
let's see
we can avoid a whole bunch of problems.
What do you want, Luke?
I think it's important to prioritize, when I talk about national divorce, what I'm specifically talking about is prioritizing states' rights, limiting the federal government, allowing people to individually decide their own kind of destiny. But at the same time, you could also have defense pacts. You could also say, hey, we're going to protect each other. Hey, we're going to have a strong national defense. If one of us gets attacked, we're going to have an alliance. But the federal government that dictates how we should be living our life, that's just too much there. We don't need all these departments. We don't need all these regulators. We don't need all these rules. We don't need all these taxes. We could go states by state, independent,
federalism.
do what you want.
Alexander Hamilton
That's
would
federalism.
would
But at the
disagree
same
with
time,
you.
that would mean a peaceful divorce because we're not reliant on a federal government keeping us together.
No. A very weak federal government for the purpose of shared national defense.
Right.
Yeah, it is a
and
defense
roads
pact.
and things like that for the most part. We're
roads,
talking
et
about
cetera,
federalism.
You keep the roads. I don't want the roads.
All right,
let the roads be private. Let's not have the whole
Screw the
roads
roads.
conversation here because it'll get crazy here. I don't want the roads.
But Luke, the first thing that's going to happen is Missouri's going to war with Kansas.
I don't think so. I think
Why?
they'll. Why? Why would that happen?
Why? You guys must not be from Missouri. First of all,
Yeah.
Jayhawks, border war. We've had a problem with them since the late 1800s. But that was what Alexander Hamilton argued in the Federalist, was that if we do not have a central federal government that puts us all in a whatever the arrangement was, 13 colonies, 13 states at the time, that they would be more willing to go to war with one another, and that the tensions between the states will be alleviated because they could seek redress throughout the federal government. And I think that argument has been proven true.
I think that's actually fantastic, and it's partly how I describe international efforts, or I don't want to say globalism because that has a connotation towards
because a one world government. If we were all under like Star Trek kind of a situation,
but I'm saying this. Imagine the United States had sovereign rights over its borders and trade, but instead of war, we adjudicated things through a court. It's preferable to war. I don't want to see our troops overseas blowing up anybody or getting blown up. I don't want to see nukes fired. As much as it might suck, it's better. So in that sense, there is a path towards.
Can I blow your mind on the global? Can I one thing real quick, Luke? I want to blow your mind here with a little situation here on the globalist thing, right? Would you rather live on an Earth that was a one world government that was governed under the United States Constitution, or would you rather live in a world where it had hundreds of governments, but they were all like North Korea?
One world government with a constitution.
Right. So I mean, you're a globalist.
No, I've often talked about this.
Globalism is inevitable.
I've often
Just
said,
how are we going to do
so
it?
one world government is inevitable in your mind.
Yeah.
It is.
Luke, get him.
No, it's true.
I was just going to say that's the argument I was going to make because what you were just saying essentially, if you're saying, oh, we're all going to be together so we don't fight each other, why don't we just create a world government just like the Rockefellers has called for and centralize more power?
How much would Mexico be improved by becoming the 51st
But this is the core to my argument, right? There's centralization of power, there's a monopoly of power, and then there's decentralization. I think we should always be striving and pushing and advocating for the decentralization of power, not for the centralization of power. Because when you centralize it enough, you have a world government. government, and that's
on.
essentially the wet dream of many eugenicists and population.
Wait, hold on. You're conflating a bunch of issues that don't need to be conflated, right? Your point about a one world government under the American Constitution is a good one. If it was actually the American Constitution, that's a really, really good thing. The issue here is, you are correct about decentralization of power, Luke, but simply because we would have a very weak treaty between countries for adjudication of border disputes and resource disputes does not mean eugenicists will start massacring children.
Right. Of course not.
Just like you were talking about annexing Canada, right? So if we added a 51st state, what you're talking about is moving towards essentially that one world government. What if Russia was just a state? What if Mexico was just a state, right? And then everyone was governed. See, that's why you have to be careful when you say, oh, well, decentralization is good, because ultimately you could say, well, North Korea is very decentralized, but it's not governed very well, right? So the question really is are individual rights protected? That's what I think is really important. And so the question is when we talk about big government, is it the size of government that matters, or is it if that government protects individual rights? And these are questions that I ask myself. I don't know the answer to that, because the American government is bigger than North Korea, but I would rather live in the American government that is bigger than the North Korean.
Everyone works for the government in North Korea.
Yeah, you're
but this is the thing, and there's a correlation between big governments and liberty going down. So when you look at that correlation historically, this is why you always.
I don't disagree with that. The North Korean government is bigger than our government. The North Korean government is absolute in their country from border to border. Everyone works for the government, is controlled by the government, and enslaved by the government.
But there are plenty of objective measures that the United States government is much larger than the North Korean government.
You're
budgetary,
yes, but hold on. You're making an argument.
Employees.
Okay. I get it. You're making an argument about hard number to number. If I'm talking about crime in Omaha, Nebraska, and New York, what matters? The hard numbers of murders or the per capita murders?
It's per capita.
Per capita. If we're talking about the size of government, North Korea is as big as government can be. Just because they're a small country physically does not mean they're a smaller government than ours.
100% government. Everybody's in the government. So I agree.
Everyone's
it's a per
spying
capita,
for the
whether
government.
Or not it's big, is what percentage of the population is involved with working for the government?
Yeah, with the United States, look at New York. New York has between 30 and 40,000 cops out of 2.5 million just in Manhattan alone. That is very little government enforcement relative to the size of the population.
I disagree. You're wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because if the government of the United States wanted to accomplish what North Korea is doing, it could. And in many ways, it does. The size of the government can be measured. What you said is a subjective measurement. I could take my own measurements and say, what do you per capita is fine. The laws of North Korea that exist are larger.
Let's define what you mean by government size.
Okay, I'm talking about the budget, the national budget. I'm talking about the number of bureaucracies that exist, the number of bureaucrats that work in those bureaucracies, the number of offices, appointed offices, right? The size and scope of the U.S. federal government by any objective measure other than what that government can do to its citizens and the power that it has over its citizens. By that measurement, I would give that to you. North Korea is a larger government in that it can reach into its citizens' lives and accomplish more in controlling its citizens' lives than the U.S. federal government, which I think is what matters, right? That is what matters.
So the problem,
but there can be an argument made that the United States government is larger.
And the reason I would disagree with your assessment is that population size doesn't dictate size of government in any meaningful way. Just because there's 330 million people here, by necessity, you have people who work in government to a certain percentage, but that percentage is minuscule compared to North Korea.
Right, but it's my point that it doesn't matter necessarily what the size of government stands, because you would still rather live in a government that is governed under the United States, in a world that is governed under the U.S. Constitution, than it is one that is decentralized republics, but they're all governed by North Korea.
But I would even counter saying no one even respects the Constitution anymore. Do you think New York State respects the Second Amendment? They don't. They absolutely don't. And this idea
the fact
of
that they've had to change their laws to adjust to what the Supreme Court has done suggests that you're incorrect.
But at the same time, look what the reality is in New York State. Look what the reality that a lot of people are living under when their basic rights are being violated by the NSA, by the federal government spying on everything.
You would get rid of the U.S. Constitution?
Absolutely not. But I would say
government
is imperfect. But one of the most closest, better ideas is, of course, the Constitution. But now we have to face the reality. But right now we have to understand.
How can you be for a national divorce and
the argument I'm saying right now is that sadly a lot of federal bureaucrats, because there's so much government, they don't respect the Constitution. The idea of the Constitution is something that they don't even know and understand because of how big our bureaucracy is. And I would even argue that just 2 years ago, we lived under a North Korean type government that went around, locked down businesses and shut people's livelihoods down and made them not even be able to, walk around freely in many instances.
Depending on your state. Didn't happen to us in Missouri.
Exactly. Why? Because decentralization, because states were able to decide what's right for themselves. But if you lived in Australia, right?
But the court cases that came out used the U.S. Constitution as precedent. So it was the federal government ultimately, and the 14th Amendment that many of these court cases relied on. If we had gone into national divorce, Luke, how could you have used the Constitution as precedent? You say they ignored it, but I mean the court cases suggest otherwise. And when Alex Jones goes to the Supreme Court, right, it will be the federal laws that he will use to protect him and his free speech.
But a lot of times that is interpreted up to the judges to make decisions that are not always beholden to the Constitution. Right. The Constitution is not a perfect idea, but it's one of the best perfect ideas that we have come close to. And I agree with you. We should try to protect the Constitution, but at the same time, we live in a reality where it's just been thrown to the side, and you can't deny that.
Right. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.